you're going to give me questions to answer.
We are live, Karen. I'm Robert
Excellent.
Wilonsky, the Director of Communications here at Heritage Auctions, and I'm joined by Karen Rigdon, who has, I believe, the longest official title at Heritage. Which is that title exactly?
I am Director of Fine Silver and Objects of Virtu and Furniture and Decorative Arts.
That is a lot of ampersands.
It is. And so
it is a wide breadth of stuff that in your categories.
correct.
And I'm fascinated by how do you've been here for about 14 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
So how does one get into this? Because I am fascinated, and we're going to discuss obviously the state of the fine silver and objects of virtue today. And we're going to discuss the marketplace over the last year and a half, sales that have taken place and how well things have done and what is upcoming. And you have something significant, I believe, you want to announce and discuss today.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and we're also going to obviously discuss some things that are sitting with us and other things that Tommy, our director, will throw up on the screen. Speaking of Tommy, it's tommyn@ha.com if you have a question that you would like to ask anonymously. Otherwise, send a question and Tommy will pop it up on the screen for me to ask Karen. So she can have beautiful objects of silver in front of her while I have a computer. It doesn't seem quite a fair trade-off.
I know. I have the best job, don't I?
You do.
Yeah.
So I want to spend 2 minutes, because one of the great things about doing these live interviews is the fact that I get to meet some folks I haven't gotten to spend a lot of time with.
Sure.
I started here a year and a half ago. I spent that first year at home, which was exciting and thrilling as one might expect it to be. So you and I actually have not had a chance to catch up.
We have not.
And I'm very excited to do so, because what I wanted to ask you first and foremost, which is everybody who works here, the love that every expert has for their particular category is infectious.
Yes.
And everybody believes that they have the best category at Heritage Auctions.
They're wrong.
Well, tell me why yours is the best.
Mine is the best. Well, you know, the objects are riveting to me. I have such a wide breadth of material that I look at. It ranges, you know, from silver to ceramics to glass to metalwork, furniture. There's so many opportunities, and each time you see an object that sort of is perfect, it just sings to you, and it makes me melt.
Do you remember the first object with which you fell in love?
Yes. So I was back in, oh my goodness, now this is going to speak of my years, but I was at Michigan State University in 1979, and that's when I had my first museum position.
Wow.
Ooh, I have not added those years up. My goodness.
12. They're 12 years.
12 years since 79. That's about
go.
right.
Well,
So,
I got into journalism because there was no math.
So I was taking history of design classes, which just really enthralled me. And we'd gotten up to modernism. I reached out to the curator. He had a large collection that had never been cataloged. And so I got to set to work and sit amongst all of the mid-century pieces that had been relegated to storage because they'd come out of favor at that point. So I was sitting there in Michigan, close to where Eames was at Cranbrook, and cataloging his furniture, and that really hit me. And you know, from going there, learning more about Cranbrook and Saarinen, falling in love with his silver. I mean, there's just so many iconic objects I learned about early on that really drew me into the field.
You know, you talk about the mid-century having fallen out of favor in 1979. And I'm curious, over the last 12 years since you've been doing this, what has fallen out of favor and what has come back into favor? I'm curious because I assume that in your category, as with all categories, there are things that are certainly in vogue, there are things that fall out of favor, and that there are things that it is cyclical. Is that in fact the case?
It is, and there's that aspect of cyclical, and there's also the aspect of how many collectors are involved. So, for example, probably in the beginning of the century, incredible American flatware serving pieces were coming into their own, and the values were going up and up and up and up. Well, it turns out that there was about 10 mostly men that were collecting these pieces and driving them up. Well, they've hit their 80s, and some have passed away, and the market fell out. However, interestingly, last year, when we had so many people at home in front of their computers, the price of the most amazing of the flatware pieces have started to rise up again, and we saw that last fall, and then it progressed again this spring, and we had some very good results for flatware serving pieces that I have not seen in the last 10 years.
So we'll get to some of that in a minute, some of the highlights of November 20 and April 21.
Oh, yes.
But I do want to ask you, as folks, certainly every category at Heritage and auction houses across the world saw enormous upticks over the last year and a half, which took everybody by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And it had to do with any number of factors. Certainly people were looking for things that they wanted to redefine what they had in their homes. They wanted to
Right.
change the looks of their homes. They wanted
Right.
to part with things that maybe they had looked at for too long.
Right.
Did you find that there were things that people were consigning to you that you had not seen in a long time, or that surprised you because, in fact, people had been just sitting on them for an extraordinary period of time? And conversely, were there things that people were buying that took you by surprise?
I was taken by surprise by the number of large collections that were released, but it did not necessarily have to do with a change in lifestyle. It was just their time had come. However, I have been surprised at interest in several areas. I had mentioned to you the whole area of pieces created in the manner of Fabergé in the late 20th century. That one caught us by surprise. So many of these pieces had been purchased originally as Fabergé pieces, and lots of money had been sunk into them.
Right.
And then we started to present them a few years ago, and we couldn't do it. We couldn't present them as they were with fake hallmarks.
Right.
So we had those laser removed and presented them. We did it once as an experiment. They sold amazingly well. And so we've continued that. But that one caught us off guard. The pieces in their own right are without doubt as fine, in some instances, maybe finer than the craftsmanship that came from Fabergé. But the person who made them did not mark them. So having pieces that are unmarked and selling very strongly was a huge surprise.
I find that utterly fascinating. So what fascinates me as well about your category is the fact that everything we sell is a piece of history. And it's also, in your case, very beautiful pieces to look at as well. And they're often very functional pieces. And I sort of wonder, for your collectors, what are the things that they are looking for? What attracts them the most? Is it the fact that it's Tiffany? Is it the design? Is it the use? Is it the form? Or is it the function? Or is it just the fact that some of these pieces are just extraordinarily beautiful to have in a home?
Mm-hmm. All of the above.
Yeah.
So you have collectors of Tiffany, and so here we have a few pieces here that are coming up in the November auction. But on the far left is a piece that is from the aesthetic movement. Tiffany, right around 1880, has all the wonderful characteristics that were incorporated from Japanese art coming into the West through the World Fairs expositions. So you have this great hand hammering and details that are brought out through the chase work. It's an incredible piece.
People are getting a good close-up look at them on the screen.
Oh, good, good. And even the little frog on top, then you might see it. Isn't it interesting that like the bend at seemingly at the elbow of the spout, where it's all crumpled up and almost looks like an elephant's trunk or
The frog right there.
Yeah, I
People
know
can
it.
see that on
So,
there as well.
you know, these pieces from the aesthetic movement are so whimsical. So there's this fun aspect. So the craftsmanship, great craftsmanship, wonderful design, but they're also just funny. They're amusing.
Right.
They're great talking points.
We
So
should tell folks when this is available.
November 16th
That's right.
is the day. And so we're looking forward to that auction.
And I assume you're still accepting consignments, given that it's so far off.
I am. My deadline is right around that end of the first week of September.
Okay.
So you have time. There's time for pieces still to come in.
KarenR@ha.com.
You got it.
Because it is, I am fascinated by what people are consigning. We'll get to that in just a minute. Because, you know, do we say where this has come from? Is this?
This comes from a gentleman collector, the Southern gentleman. So that
A Southern gentleman.
a Southern gentleman.
Okay.
Yes,
Well, it's a beautiful piece.
it is.
So,
But this particular collector is also interested in Tiffany at large.
Yeah.
And the finest of late 19th century American silver, which is where American hits its stride for silver. And this other set, these two pieces come from a very large service that we'll be presenting of Tiffany's bird's nest pattern. This service is interesting, and I'm going to be watching it closely because it is unmarked. We know that that's the maker, that Tiffany and Company made it. However, it's very unusual to find an example by Tiffany that's not marked. And here we have that.
so how do we know it's by Tiffany if it is in fact unmarked?
The degree of finishing, the overall form decoration, but that degree of finishing is so fine that it speaks very loudly of who did the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, is it that obvious? Are certain factories, makers, designers so obvious, regardless of whether or not the work is marked based upon? Because I would certainly think that there may be somebody who might be expert at making something that looks Tiffany-like.
Yeah, and certainly, you know, we find fakes, and you know they speak to you over time. They might appear correct at the moment when you first see them,
Right.
but then as you start to look at the surfaces, the composition, and then the marks, there's a lot of ways that we, you know, pull out the truth.
Is that one of the things? See, as someone who spent 30 years in journalism, that's the thing I love most about the job. Getting as close to the truth as one can possibly get.
Right.
And I'm fascinated by the detective work that goes into something like this as well. Because if it's unmarked, I assume the consignor may go, I think this is Tiffany, or I know this is Tiffany. I was told this is Tiffany. When I bought it was Tiffany. And that at that point, you have to set about to prove or disprove what you believe to be the case.
Correct.
So how long does that process take you?
Well, it could take seconds. It could take hours, or it could hit you like a week after you've first seen it, or maybe even longer. Sometimes, you know, it depends how much time you're spending with an object. You know, if you're just walking by it in the warehouse, it might take a little bit longer to actually come up with that bit of information than if it's at your desk and you're handling it and spending time with it.
And I assume there's obviously a long history of, there's documentation, you know,
Right.
that exists as well for you to check. I assume databases have been available at this point.
Right. And then of course, for Tiffany, there's the Tiffany Archives,
Right.
which is a great resource.
Does this show up in the Tiffany Archives?
Oh, that I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
And that goes with it as well, correct?
It does. It does. So this is actually a kettle on stand, and then there's the teapot, coffee pot, sugar creamer, waste bowl. It goes on. There's something for each portion of the process of drinking or drinking tea and coffee.
I'm about to ask the dumbest question I'm sure you'll get all year.
What?
Were these ever used for their function?
Oh, I do hope so.
Okay.
I anticipate
because they're
they
so
were.
beautiful that I would never, if I owned these, I would stare at them, but I would never use them.
Definitely, that's why I like the decorative arts or applied arts, because they're objects that they were created to be beautiful and used in daily life.
Sure.
As opposed to something that hangs on the wall that you're not supposed to touch. You know, we're supposed to pick this up, and we're supposed to enjoy that balance this incredible balance. I mean, this doesn't feel like an average.
Well, this I would use. This looks like
Good.
something
I'm glad.
I would use this.
Good. I'm glad. Glad.
This has been used.
It has been used.
Yes.
I would assume it's been used
Yes.
nicely. It's in very good condition.
It is. Well, so what am I holding?
This is Gorham's circa 70 service, and it was
This is 1970s.
designed in 1960.
Really?
So it was forward-looking, space age. You have this wonderful flow of lines. You have this angle, and they're all juxtaposed into this beautiful whole. And within this incredible tray, did you notice this tray?
I did. That tray is
With
enormous.
yeah, and then the form of the tray is so unusual. It has a Formica base.
Is it meant to spin like this, or is it on a just because we're sitting on a we have it on a marble table?
It's on this table.
Okay.
It's pretty smooth surface.
I say it's very nice. It's very.
It's like a lazy Susan.
I was going to say it's very nice.
That's not intention.
But if you have a table that's smooth,
you could
works out well.
do that.
Would you like some
Exactly.
sugar?
Right. And then we point it back. So, but yeah, look at these wonderful finials. You know, how delicate this is. But overall, so it was, yeah, so the idea of this forward design created by Donald Coleflesh, wonderful designer of some of Gorham's best production during that time. So you have the design, you have the designer, and the manufacturer, and so all those aspects play into a fabulous service. It's only come up frequently in the last years, because this is actually, there's two trays made for this service, and this is the second tray. The first one was just a simple round tray.
How dare they?
This deserves this tray. And so I'm so pleased to have them together.
So obviously this is in November as well. We'll get to this in a moment because I kind of want to save that for last.
Oh, the centerpiece.
Yeah, that's
Please.
Extraordinary.
Sure.
I mean, even a Neanderthal dum-dum like myself
Oh.
can recognize
See?
objects of great beauty.
It's all by osmosis.
It
The
is.
more you're here, the
I have
more you're
soaked it in.
appreciating. Right.
But I wanted to ask you about, I wanted to go back to November, because obviously the point of these, in large part, these conversations are about how the market's evolved in the last year and a half.
Right.
And November 20, when you had the JD Parks,
Right.
obviously did extraordinarily well.
It did.
So let's talk about why that did as well as it did, and were you surprised by its success?
So, the consignor and I were very nervous going into the sale, because we did not know what to expect. During this time, there seemed to be an increasing reliance on the internet. So the bids were coming in through the internet, probably more late in the cycle than is comfortable. So I typically
We do find the
out.
action happens kind of a little closer.
Yeah,
to
well,
the action.
2 years ago, I used to have maybe 75% of the sales sold a week out. Here, we're getting closer and closer and closer. People are keeping their hands tight. They're not showing their cards.
I was going to say.
Right? And so we didn't really know how the sale was going to go until, right up to the sale. We started to get some bids on the top lots within a few days. However, most of the bidding and lots of the top lots entered the sale without an initial bid, and it all flowed that day.
Yeah. So when that happens, and I've seen that happen in different categories. Some categories, the bidding happens fast and furious early
Right.
and throughout. Comics, for instance.
Right.
The Amazing Fantasy number 15 is still 2 weeks away, and that's
And it's
already
still
at $2 million.
Incredible.
So when you see in sports, there's a lot of bidding early, and then as it goes to extended bidding, that's where it happens, because you have to get in on the extended in order to participate. So when that happens, and I am curious about how the bidding takes place in your category. Is it historically now? I guess I should say now.
Now,
Have you seen it over the last several months, because it is so much driven toward the internet, and because we've seen that? Obviously, Heritage was kind of built for the pandemic. We were
Correct.
online for 20 years. But did you see that bidding did, in fact, And that has that continued going into this year as well.
Yes, and it has continued into this year, and so all those questions that I had prior to the November sale, continued into April, when our in April, May, when we were wondering, is this effect going to continue? And it did. Between those two sales, I received a number of calls from individuals who had never purchased in the silver sales. They'd never actually bought silver at all.
Really?
And they were looking at it as a new collecting adventure and a new direction to go. Maybe, they had been collecting coins. Actually, that's pretty much where I'm seeing the greatest growth, is from some coin collectors who are expanding into related fields.
It's interesting because a lot of categories and a lot of experts talk about the fact that they've seen a lot of crossover in the last year
more
and a half.
so than ever.
Yeah, sports and the comics, coins and the sports,
right?
Things like that.
Right, and of course, in the spring sale, we had that amazing Revere collection from Patrick.
Well, let's get to that in a sec.
Okay.
We'll get to the Revere collection because that was the Patrick, that was the coin related to the coin sale.
Yeah, that's that.
But let's talk about J.D. Parks.
Yes.
Because what made that so special? And let's talk about why it did so well. Because we talked about the fact that going into it, you were nervous. Because obviously the bidding was taking place at a different pace at which you were used to.
Right.
So when in fact it takes off, and when it does is remarkably well. Tiffany pieces, and I think the Yachting Goblet was the real standout in that.
Correct.
And again, that's another piece that even I, as a dum-dum, could look at and go, that's an extraordinary piece.
A tour de force of late 19th century.
People are looking at it right now.
Great, of a late 19th century American silver, Gilded age to the extreme. You have that. You have the size. It's incredibly massive. It has the form that's just entwining. You have the mermaid and the dolphin entwining, and then you have the incredible finishing of the surface.
Right.
This piece is phenomenal. It was last presented in 1998 publicly. So that's where this collection was birthed through excitement, having seen the Niederhofer sale in 1998. J.D. Parks was enamored by this collection and decided to follow suit, creating a collection likewise that would have great trophies, but he particularly focused on American.
Yeah.
So it was just American
and
trophies.
Literal trophies too. I mean, that's, we talk about trophy pieces.
Oh no, these are trophies. So these are all the lion's share sporting trophies, but then there's also presentation pieces, presented from, just to mark an occasion, or a segue into a new area, a part of life.
It's bad that I collect 70s soccer trophies because they're made of plastic and they're entirely useless.
That's too bad.
They have very little value to me or to anyone else. I should have collected late 1800s.
You can always start.
Well, so let me ask you that. How do folks, so when somebody decides they want to get into collecting trophies, that's how does one decide to do that? And to that point, when people come to you and to start putting together collections, how do you advise them to put them together? If in fact folks are coming to you now who've never really bought in silver before, who are coins, I assume that they then say, all right, I'm now interested in this because it's beautiful or because I'm going to use it, but I may want to put together a collection. How would you advise them? So
the starting point is what ignites your interest.
We always say, buy what you love.
Right. So so I always advise starting there. And so, for example, well, I know you don't want me to segue into it, but the person who called, to talk about the Revere silver.
Yeah, let's get to that.
This was a new collector.
That was in April. So let's go from the November sale to the April sale, correct?
New collector.
Yeah.
Wanted a piece of Revere because that the whole idea of history. You have the crossover with colonial coins, and there's so many areas that sort of overlap there. Had never purchased silver utilitarian piece.
Right. We're looking at the spoon right now.
And what's amazing to me is he carried it to a record. So this is the highest, this is the most ever paid for a single American spoon at auction.
$32,500.
That's a lot.
For a spoon.
For one spoon.
I have to say there are a few things. There are different categories that I look at. And I look at prices, and I granted I've been in the auction world a year and a half, but there are certain things I look at and go, I need somebody to explain that to me. I'm very glad you're here because I need you to explain to me a $32,500 spoon.
Paul Revere. You know, he had to have a piece that was, you know, that's stamped by this incredible American patriot.
Yes.
And the spoon is the piece amongst all these 9 lots, an incredible number of Revere lots. This is the piece that spoke to him most, and he was going to have it.
Tommy, can you throw that spoon up there again?
He had to have it. And
let's see the stamp, because that's really what you're paying for, the stamp. It's the...
Well, you have to know that that's who made it.
So that's my other question. So, you know, walk me through a little bit of that. That's
okay. Well, so there is, you know, this is something that when someone calls that I can speak into about which individuals have looked at it and given their mark of approval. And in this instance, we had the individual that is best known for her work with Revere and with colonial silversmiths from Massachusetts, and she was able to give her confidence that this was correct.
See, that's one of the things I really love about being in this building, and for the first year not being able to be here was the most frustrating part, because there is so much American history in this building.
Yeah, and you know, and so it's important to have your network of who to reach out to.
Right.
Because how many Revere spoons really come through my hands?
How many?
Besides these 9 lots, maybe 3 others.
Really?
in
the 12 years of doing this.
In my years here.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you're 14 years here, but you're 12. You're
right. And
since
so
1979.
So that's not enough for me to stand behind on my own word a spoon that's going to sell for $32,000. I want to have some more expert strength behind that.
Are there other things that are like the Revere spoon that have come through here that are so infrequent that you are kind of blown away by them? I assume that there have been other things like that. Yes,
yeah, there are, and so there's been quite a few over the years.
Is there one thing that really stands out to you, or something? And I'll ask you what I have asked a couple of other folks who've been in here.
That's a good question.
Are there things, as you are looking for consignments for the November sale?
Yeah.
I always kind of wonder, is there that holy grail thing that you know is out there, that you know somebody has to have, that you've never seen, that you've always wanted to sell?
That I've always wanted to sell.
Or just a thing that you wanted to hold, that you know is out there somewhere in the wild? Some beautiful piece of silver, something made by... Well,
you know, for me, one of the first pieces of silver I fell in love with, because I was at the Victoria and Albert for a short period of time, and was enamored by the silver of Charles Ashby. Oh, they're just these wonderful attenuated lines of his handles, and you know, the perfect placement of maybe a hardstone embellishment. And I would love to come across a piece by Ashby to present.
That sounds awesome.
Mm-hmm.
If someone has one they want to consign.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure you'd be delighted.
I would be.
So let's talk about American Gilded Age silver.
Okay.
That was also a very big hit, if I'm not mistaken, in the April sale.
And the November, because that was the collection was the Gilded Age sale. But yeah, Gilded Age material is where America really shone for the first time within the silver community worldwide. Yeah, I mean, we have Tiffany, we have Whiting, we have Gorham. There was just inordinate amount of talent and out there at that point, mixed with the desire for silver production by the elite, but also by the rising middle class. So there's a huge demand for silver during that period. There was also this one of the we had the Comstock lode that was discovered, which brought silver prices crashing. So you had silver was cheap. There was money out there, and the two together created the most wonderful pieces that were ever created.
Is it because there was this sort of ease of experimentation because it was so inexpensive that you could kind of do whatever you wanted and see if it worked?
And a demand for it because everyone wanted the latest and greatest.
And because it wasn't as expensive as it had been.
Right. Well, the workmanship that goes in was expensive.
Yeah.
Right. But the material itself wasn't.
There was that.
Right. So, that wonderful trophy that we talked about from November, maybe the silver was down in value, but that took so much time to create.
Do you know how long that took?
I don't offhand, but I did get the Tiffany Archives did send me a report on that piece, so we did have all the details to be able to share. It's in the cataloging, a lot of that information, but I don't have it offhand, but months.
Obviously, the Tiffany Archives knows it's out there, and they knew it sold in 1998. I'm fascinated by when a piece comes back to them. Do they share your enthusiasm? Are they as giddy?
Well, they're a resource. They're a resource that you go to if you need drawings, things like that. But yes, they're great research. They're very, very excited about what they do.
That's very, very neat. Also, I think the Paul store did incredibly well.
Yes, it did. It did, and I believe that just like with the Revere, the sheer number of pieces that were presented in that single collection brought interest and energy of bidding to the whole. So some of the results we got were much stronger than anticipated. So I think we have a picture of the hot water kettle.
Yes, we're looking at it right now.
Yeah, that did
38,000.
38,000.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's a handsome piece, real strong lines, very indicative of store's work.
And came from a Dallas collection, so
it did.
So somebody local had that.
Correct.
I am curious. Do you find that since we're in Dallas, incredible, there's a lot of wealth in Dallas and a lot of folks with very good taste.
Yes.
Do you find that our consignments are obviously global, in as much as we have 1.5 million consigners across the planet?
Right.
But I've always been kind of curious, as somebody born and raised in Dallas, what is our Dallas reach in terms of, do we get a lot of consignments locally?
Yes, we do. And with time, we come to people's mind faster and faster.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I would say that we're a fixture here. People know we're here.
Right.
And so there's, generally speaking, I hear from people who are looking to sell silver here, and there are quite a few collectors here.
Do you want to talk about what's upcoming with your breaking news? Speaking of local, do you want to do that?
Sure, I'm so excited.
Well, we have folks' attention. If you have a question, feel free to ask it. But we figured, since you've joined us for this very special presentation, that Karen would break some news here. So
we are thrilled. I'm honored to be presenting on November 16th the collection of Dr. Charles L. Venable, who was, as we're speaking of Dallas. That's why I brought it up. He was here. He was he's the one who was responsible for building, or for the creation of the silver collection at the Dallas Museum of Art. So very well thought of. His scholarship is impeccable. Folks are seeing some of that right now. Just spectacular, spectacular impact on the history of silver collecting. I would say, prior to his book that he published along with the exhibition at the museum, silver in America, there really was very, very little interest or focus from any collector on late 19th, early 20th century American silver.
Really?
Yeah.
So one book, one scholar.
One scholar, one book made a huge impact on the field. So I would say prior to that, if you're collecting silver, it would have been English.
Fascinating.
After that, people felt freed up to delve into a new, really unreached area. So there was a lot of silver available. Charles it was a brilliant move. He was able to amass a large collection very affordably. So he got the funds together and created this collection. In turn, many gifts came in as well. And so I would say, it's definitely one of the strongest silver collections in this country, American silver collections.
And we will likely do a video as we get a little closer to the auction.
Absolutely. I would like to do that very much. And Charles would like to talk about, his world with silver. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Just have to get me to read it.
Okay.
Or just have to give me a copy of the book and I'll be happy to read it.
Excellent.
I look forward
There's
to
many
that.
actually.
Well, so but yeah, I think that's one thing. That's one reason why I came to Heritage, because I wanted to learn more about American history, and I find that learning about American history through its objects rather than through its words is far more engaging for me. Whether it's America's cinema, about which I wrote for years, or its music, which was a specialty of mine. Silver was not necessarily a thing that I grew up around, although my grandparents had a great deal when I was a kid. But to me, the stories that these items tell is extraordinary to me. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited about the opportunity that we're going to have that conversation with Charles.
Excellent. I am too. It'll be fun.
Well, very nice. So let's talk about one more thing from the April sale, the George Jensen silver from the collection of James Young. That was another big hit.
Yes.
Did that take you by surprise?
No, that was an area that there is great interest in collecting Jensen silver. There were some results that far surpassed
right
what we anticipated.
Right. So when there's interest in a particular, if there's interest in Jensen,
right,
and then it exceeds your expectations, do you then go why, or do you just go great? That's awesome.
No, there's a why.
Tell me the why.
So it's all those pieces of the puzzle that we've talked about coming up to this point. There's a new breadth of silver collectors. There's more people interested in getting online. There's a lot of people that know the value of Jensen. That they know the retail value of Jensen. You can hop into an auction and do very well for yourself. So this is this area that's created in numbers, and so you don't have one picture created in a Jensen pattern. You have a whole series, and so right. you can do your research. You can look online and see where they're selling at retail. And then you can make a plan of how you're going to acquire this.
Right.
So we have a lot of research at our fingertips. So there is that. Jensen, Jensen is well loved, and so people came to the sale. We have a large body of Jensen buyers, but more so than ever because of the sheer number of lots. Mm-hmm. It's that mass always brings more interest. So if it had been fewer objects, I would think that would have impacted the overall result.
See, I'm interested because I would think that, the supply and demand, that the less that there is, the more people are wanting to be there because, all right, there are scant few items available. But if there are more, then...
Well, but you have, your whole area, just like in fine art, of multiples, prints and multiples.
Right.
And so it's being aware of how few were made and knowing that, you know, especially for some of these larger pieces, that you're among the few that own one.
Right.
They don't come up, the large pieces in particular don't come up frequently. So the covered bowl that sold so well,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the last time I saw that was in 2019 and it sold for 20,000.
Right.
And so that the rarity with the mass of people played into the best results possible for that piece.
Right. So let's look ahead again to November. Obviously, we've discussed some things. We've talked about some of the stuff that's in front of us that's available in November.
Mhm.
Is there anything besides what's sitting up here that's upcoming in November?
And there's this piece.
Well, that's what I mean, this.
Well, there's
Anything
this
besides that?
piece.
Because I want to save this for
there's,
last.
I mean, there's wonderful
You have
silver
Tiffany Silver.
coming.
We've discussed this. Then,
We have Tiffany. We actually have a very wide array of Jensen for this sale
Really?
also. Mm-hmm. And so there, James Young has brought together some more pieces for us, and other collectors that saw the results have added to our collection for this fall.
So that is obviously why we do these and why we talk about these, is the fact that people see the results from one sale and go, it's time. Now it's time for me to put this thing I've had in my home or my family for decades or centuries, and it's time to sell them.
Yeah, and so when somebody calls with Jensen and says, you know, is this the time to sell? I'll say it is, because we have this body of material against which to present it. It will bring it to more people's attention as a result. Yeah. I'm always skeptical of bringing in a single piece. So I had this wonderful, I'm not sure if you saw it, but it was on display. It was a Peruvian Eucharist vessel that had a wingspan of about 6 feet.
Was it in the gallery?
It was.
I saw that. And
4.5 feet tall. Well, that piece made me a little uncomfortable because there was nothing else comparable. Nowhere, and certainly not in that auction. So
you got to have a big house for that thing.
Yes, and so, you know, when there's a single piece, it's, you know, luckily if it's a single piece, if it's a single piece, it stands out great.
Right.
But say, you know, it's just a single box that's from like Poland, in the midst of this wholesale, it's going to be lost. And it doesn't matter how fine it is. I'm always looking to present pieces within a body of work.
Right. So I've been saving this for the last. I want you to tell me all about this.
Isn't it spectacular?
It really is. And you have to see it up close, and I'm sure Tommy will put it up on the screen.
Yes. And so, you know, this piece is electroplated. It's not sterling.
Really?
And it's made by Elkington, who developed electroplating during in the 19th century. And so this is an incredible example of that. You're going to see just as much detail, finishing, as you would in sterling pieces. And here you have the whole presentation. I mean, this is such a complete work of art in the round. You can see it in the round proportion scale, the massing. The figures are burst out because of their scale, but then also you have this enamel work, which is very rarely seen on silver and almost never on plated material.
So 1875?
Correct.
I can't imagine what that process would have been like in 1875.
It's a long process. And so the electroplating method, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
I am, only in as much as I'm aware of what it leaves behind.
The what? Does it leave?
The chemicals.
The chemicals. Yes. It certainly does. But it applies the silver
the
evenly.
Superfund sites that result from electroplating decades, centuries afterwards.
But it allows the silver to be adhered evenly. So the thickness of the silver is even and strong. There's no loss. So excellent object. Even down to the little centerpiece. I'm not sure if you can see that in there. Maybe you saw that, but see that little ball in the center with the stars? I mean, it's just all the details are there. I love this piece.
So Long John Silver asks a question.
Oh.
Can you comment on the market for match safes and silver smalls?
Mm-hmm. So we have presented many match safes over the years.
They're very cool. I like
yeah,
those.
Jan Antonelli's collection was like 1,000 pieces. I mean, it was fabulous. We certainly are interested in presenting match safes. We haven't received any collections recently. Overall, value has not regained the height of say circa 2010. They seem to have come down a bit. I'm not able to, it's strange because there's still a very avid collecting base, and they're very much loved.
I assume people used them when they bought them in recent years, right? I mean, they're
recently
last 20, 30, 40 years.
They're mostly collected for displays.
Are they really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's some gorgeous displays.
They are. They're beautiful. Tommy just had one up. There's another one.
Yeah, they're beautiful and finely made. Now, the very rarest of the rare will still go for really top money. However, the middling pieces, like say the group that are in that $400 to $800 range, they're just not finding the favor that they were at one point.
See, somebody don't want to carry that around their pocket with some matches.
We don't need to. So people maybe put their calling cards in them.
Right.
Or
but matches would be even cooler.
Yes, but you know why they had them in the first place.
Why?
Because matches were combustible.
Yes.
You had to keep them in a container so that they didn't rub on your clothes by mistake, because that would bring them to flame.
Sure.
And so we don't need them for quite that purpose, but we need them for carrying our cards.
All right, so I want to ask you this. So I have a really dumb guy question that's out of left field. Was the design of the Zippo lighter based on the match safe?
I would imagine it is, but I would have to do some reading up to find out.
I want to know. I'm just curious.
I wonder if one of our
If you're watching out there and you know the answer to my question,
please.
Often you ask questions out there, but if you know the answer to my question, please feel free to let me know. RobertW@ha.com.
Well, share that with me.
I have no doubt that they look identical.
Yeah, it completely makes sense.
I just always assume that that's kind of the. So what about silver smalls?
Silver smalls, once again, we're not presenting them as much as we used to as our price point is going up.
Right.
There's still a very active, avid collecting group for those pieces, and whenever we can bring them in with larger collections, we do, and they always sell well. We have quite a few smalls in the upcoming sale, and I look forward to seeing how active our bidding base is for those pieces. When they're great pieces, bidding is strong.
Right. But it seems the bigger the piece these days is the more coveted or the most popular.
Not necessarily.
No,
because you have your wonderful smalls, like the match safes, like the Tiffany. I'm not sure if you saw that on screen, but there's the Tiffany enameled match safe.
Yes.
Exquisite.
It is.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Coveted object. There's a lot of smalls that are coveted. So when you have smalls, you're also going into objects of air too. So we have, our gold, and we have our silver enameled pieces. We have our jeweled pieces. Those smalls are very actively collected.
You and I have a lot to talk about. I'm just,
oh, good.
I just find that there's a world out there with which I am wildly unfamiliar. So
we learn every day. I find this to be the truth.
Well, I appreciate you doing this.
Well, thank you so much.
And I appreciate everybody who's watched. If you have a question, you can always email Karen at karenr@ha.com, or you can consign certainly through that.
Absolutely.
You're accepting consignments through when?
I am accepting consignments. I'm wanting them in by that second week in September. Also, feel free to call me at 214-409-1723.
We'll be doing another video with Charles a little closer to the sale on November 16th, the Silver and Vertu signature auction. This has been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a delight.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Right.
And thank you, everybody.
Mm.
Thanks.